Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us at today's Design Lounge session. I'm very excited about covering a very topical subject of user-generated content. A lot of you would understand that of being the various YouTube videos that you see online. You may also come across it via crowdsourcing, which is growing rapidly in the marketplace. And I'm very fortunate today to have an expert market leader and serial startup, Steve Hulford, who's going to share with us some insights and thoughts on user-generated content. Okay, Steve, talk to me a little bit about your story and your user content generated company.
Yeah, it's a company called FileMobile. We have a platform called Media Factory, and it's essentially a social marketing suite for brands, media companies, and digital agencies. We've been around since 2006. It is my third startup. The first two were in the fantasy sports space, where people build their own fantasy hockey games and they play against each other for fun and profit. We exited those in 2008, and we've been focused full-time on FileMobile since then. And we work with brands, media companies, digital agencies, and we've executed over 2,000 user-generated content programs since 2006.
Well, that's fantastic. Obviously, you've been very busy, and can you talk a little bit about the trends that have led up to you starting your company? What was the driving factor? What was missing in the marketplace?
I think we were definitely in very early. In 2006, the opportunity that we saw was to have a content management system that media companies could use to ask their audiences to send them in photos and videos that they could use on television. So we started in 2006 with CBC and Much Music as clients. Much Music was what they saw back then. It was, that at concerts and music venues, that the lighter had been replaced by the cell phone, and people were snapping photos and videos, and Flickr was hot back then, and YouTube was just starting, and people were putting these photos and videos into those public places, and what the media companies thought was, let's have them put them on our site. So they started asking them to submit photos and videos, and that was sort of where we saw the opportunity. And that led to citizen journalism and news gathering organizations like the Weather Network and CTV and CP24 that were looking to get news coverage, news footage, and use that on television. So our system integrates right into their broadcast system. So you take a picture or video on your phone, it goes through our platform, where a moderator will approve or deny it, and then it can go on their website, their mobile site, and on television.
Yeah, it brings to mind a lot of the news you see today on the TV, on the networks are really user-generated. If you look at Greece right now, the riots are happening. A lot of that videotaping is done by people with smartphones. Where do you see this going in the industry? Do you see that user-generated content will dominate how networks broadcast, or do you see it being an even shift, or do you see that we've kind of plateaued on user-generated content?
That's a good question. I think where it seems to be going is a combination of user-generated content and professional content curated by the news organizations. So I think some of the news organizations that have really that are using user-generated content, and they're following Twitter and things like that, they've actually completely changed the way they even operate in the newsroom. And you've got a large group of people now sifting through tweets and sifting through different social media networks and information that's coming out, and they're responding to that. So a story might start out as a tweet, and then the next thing they know, there's photos and videos coming out of their own Twitter, and then they're like, let's send our journalists down there. And where we see UGC going is we see a lot of our clients, they'll have apps that they'll be able to crowdsource immediately an assignment. So they'll be able to say, there's a car accident at Yonge and Bloor. Let's create an assignment for that, and we'll send it out. And we know there's 75 people in our community that are within a 5-10 square block radius. Let's send them a notice and ask them to send photos and videos. And that's how, now you'll still have the professional journalists curating that stuff, but maybe the only footage they have is the stuff that was shot on scene by a citizen journalist. They'll actually fill in the story. The video might come in, they may actually call up that citizen journalist and say, hey, you were there on the scene, what happened? And do what journalists do, and that is tell the story.
Well, I find that very, citizen journalist, I think that's a great catchphrase for where we're heading. When you look at where consumer-generated content, a lot of the focus has been around the news media. But how do you think brands, I think of P&G and PepsiCo, how can they leverage this user-generated content?
That's a good question. Yeah, we've been working with a lot of different brands, and you're starting to see a lot more uptake from brands with user-generated content. In particular, this last Super Bowl, I just read this morning that of the top 10 ads on the Super Bowl, 3 were either crowdsourced or user-generated content produced.
Wow.
The number one most popular one was the Frito-Lay commercial for Doritos, where they actually had a contest called Crash the Super Bowl, and they were going to give $1 million to someone to produce a 30-second spot. And that 30-second spot was the most popular ad on the Super Bowl. I think what brands are starting to see is that UGC gives a lot of authenticity. Consumers tend to be, particularly ones that are using social media, are pretty wired in. They're getting absolutely inundated with different messages, and they tend to be jaded. And user-generated content is a tool that you can use to provide authenticity. And I read a quote from a Canadian Sport Check was saying that if they're going to go open up a new outlet in Gonder, Newfoundland, they're more likely to use user-generated content assets to depict the marketing of that versus models. So it's more powerful in that regard. And user-generated content, like the way we define that, is voting, rating, commenting, uploading photos and videos, and all those are social activities you can do inside applications. And when you have powerful platforms like Facebook Connect, and you're running a program that has Facebook Connect enabled, we can broadcast all those messages into the friend feed and then send that audience back out into the program. So we're seeing massive referral traffic and massive audiences driven from these programs because we share all those social activities. I think that's why Procter & Gamble has said, we're laying off 1,600 people because we can market on Facebook for free. It's that viral sharing that's really become very popular, and UGC is an excellent tool to facilitate that.
I find that very interesting. There's the flip side of UGC, which is that the content can be negative. And so you look at British Petroleum and what happened in Florida. What are the kind of watch-outs if I'm a brand marketer or someone involved in the media to be careful that that media-generated content is one that puts the company in the right light, or maybe that's wrong thinking, and that even bad comments are a good thing. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think there's nowhere to hide anymore. It seems like the old the book The Clue Train Manifesto talked about how brands were going to really expose their inner workings with the coming of the digital revolution. And I think that's really very true. And I think in the case of British Petroleum, they'd be very hard pressed to find some good PR out of what went down there. And they're sure there's all kinds of examples where you'll run a UGC campaign and things will get hijacked and some negative things will come out of that. We've seen all kinds of different things. At the end of the day, I think you do need to control. I know that word is often considered bad. I think you do need to control it. You need to curate your content. You need to moderate it. Find the best stuff. Promote the best stuff. If you're running a contest where you're voting, for example, you'll need to, consider how you're going to use those votes to declare the winner. We always recommend you have a judging panel, and then you take the votes as a part of the consideration. Because, the fact is, people could write bots and rig voting. It's not 100% democratic right now. So there's lots of little pitfalls that you need to watch out for. And, unfortunately, some brands, due to some things that might be going on, they can get some adverse backlash. And I think they just need to be ready for that, and jump on and react quickly to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just finished a big study on the role packaging has in an online world, and one of the key influencers on people buying a product online is the testimonials and third-party valuations. And I was just reading recently that some of those were rigged by the packaged good companies. And so, what are the things that are the big watch-outs that a CPG company looking at doing this would need to be sensitive to? This idea of transparency, I think, is very important. So what would be some of the watch-outs?
Well, I think, you need to be careful. When people are uploading photos and videos, for example, you need to have a moderator there. You need to set your moderation guidelines right up front. And if you have a team moderating it, you need to, before you approve something that goes out into the web community, you should make sure that you have very strict rules and guidelines around that. And if you see something very controversial, obviously you need to escalate that to your agency that you're working with, or the brand that you're working with, and see if they can publish that stuff live. Stuff that gets out there and that people react to, again, I think you just need to be upfront about it, and do your best to be on top of it from a social media perspective. If you start to see some a negative wave, you'll need to obviously have your PR folks there and take care of that, and acknowledge that it is going on, and don't sit back, react quickly. I think with a lot of the programs that our clients run, they may be outsourcing moderation to some third party, and they're kind of quite distant from it. So these things sort of take off and create a life of their own before they have a chance to do anything about it.
Yeah, I saw that last year with Domino's Pizza, where they were too slow to respond to a YouTube video that two employees had done on desecrating a pizza at a Domino's Pizza. And I know that there were huge repercussions for their slow reaction. So what would if you're a director of marketing or director of public relations at a company, what are the systems you need to put in place to safeguard you from these kind of situations?
Well, I think when you're doing a UGC program, you need to be very specific about what it is you're looking for. So the broader your call to action is, the more the chances are you're going to get content that isn't on the mark. And you need to be very specific about what you can and cannot upload and things like that. The more specific your program is and the call to action, you'll be able to deny content that is not the right content fit, for example. And it doesn't get out into the wild for all to see. We ran a program with CBC. They were doing the theme song, the new theme song to Hockey Night in Canada.
Oh, yes.
And very early on in the program, someone uploaded a song, and it made your ears bleed when you heard it. It was so terrible. And they had actually gone on to a satirical community website called fark.com, and they had told that community that they're doing this. They're going to post a song that's just terrible, and they wanted everyone from the community to come in and just say that this is the best song they've ever heard, and leave comments and vote for it. And soon before long, it was the #1 most watched song. It was starting to get radio play, and the person was being interviewed, and it didn't fit the content requirements. I mean, it was a terrible song. It was undeniable. And every now and then you'd see someone comment on it and say, this is terrible. Is everyone crazy? And CBC, they weren't quite sure what to do with it. They denied it, and then there was a following backlash to it. And then they actually decided to, okay, let's go with this. And they interviewed the guy as well and said, tell us about your song. I think he was on, Gian Gameshi interviewed him. And soon it just ran out of steam and started sort of filtering down the list of the most popular. And it really wasn't an issue. I mean, by the time the contest was over, they had some great songs. And, the cream rises to the top. And in this case, this video was able to sort of go away.
So really one of the insights there is don't try and suppress it, work with it, and really leverage transparency. So had they opted to kind of try and squash it, it would have actually made that situation worse.
It would, yeah, that's right. I think they acknowledged that it was a funny kind of anecdote that was going on in the contest, and it started to once they embraced it, it kind of diffused it.
Yeah. So how can the UGC increase brand engagement for companies?
Well, UGC, we think of like digital programs that take place online. There's Facebook, for example, and LinkedIn and Google+. When you have a program that runs inside Facebook or even outside of Facebook in a white labeled environment, you have these social activities I talked about, voting, rating, commenting, and uploading. And when someone comes in and participates in that program, we broadcast those activities to the friend feed, which drives massive referral traffic. That's probably the most disruptive technology that we've seen in terms of earned media. Like a good example was we did a contest with Maxim magazine. They did a contest. They run it every year. It's called the Hometown Hotties. It's girls upload.
Why did I miss that one?
Girls upload pictures and videos of themselves, and guys vote on them. And what we found when we added the social sharing through the vote activity was that 30% of all the traffic that came to the Maxim Hometown Hotties came from Facebook. So they were discovering this program not from the marketing Maxim was doing, but they found it through their friends who were sharing this content on Facebook. And for a long time, it had more traffic coming to it from Facebook than it did from Maxim. So
Wow.
I think that's a really, really important thing, is think about how you engage those social networks, and then think about a concept that really can leverage the friend feed. And I'll give you an example. When someone plays on a sports team, they're bound to have 30 or 40 friends that are probably also friends on Facebook. So if you can find a concept that'll resonate with that group, it'll spread virally quicker. And we did a contest where you had to nominate your favorite coach, and you had to go in and not only nominate them by uploading a picture or video of them, but also give a reference. And that concept really resonated, and it spread very virally very quickly. And of course, friends they're inside a sports team would probably be found on the same social network. And then competitors in that social network would nominate their coach, and it would quickly spread virally. And we have some evidence of the earned media of these programs can exceed $250,000 in the case of a contest where they ran the 30-second spot on TV with $250,000 worth of ad inventory, and yet the number one source of traffic was Facebook, which is, again, it's free to implement. And all that is really earned media.
Well,
it's a great way to engage.
So I'm wondering, will the definition of earned media shift with more and more of this online? I mean, and the decreased amount of earned media, will we see that reference of earned media shifting also?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, in this case, the definition really is that it's the viral effect of sharing inside Facebook that kind of qualifies as earned media. It's just like word of mouth. It's word of sharing. And it has a very powerful impact on a lot of these programs. And what you see, typically, if it's very high and there's a lot of that sharing going on, you'll find the same buzz going on in Twitter, the same buzz going on that carries from Facebook into Twitter, and that's all traffic that you essentially earned.
So when you think of user-generated content and a lot of the initiatives that you're talking about, you could argue it's it definitely is replacing conventional marketing. But conventional marketing, it's really hard to equate dollar sales increases due to the advertising initiatives. Is that shifting now with user-generated content? In other words, is it more measurable? Is it more effective at growing business?
The ROI on this stuff is something that we're always challenged with, to try to put together what the ROI is from a user-generated content campaign. We're not perfectly there yet. I mean, it comes down to things like how many new Facebook fans are you bringing, and what sort of dollar figure to put on a Facebook fan. How many emails you're sending out, how much traffic you're getting, how big your database is, how many opt-ins you're getting. Those tend to be sort of metrics that we're looking at. And Facebook brings in a whole bunch of new metrics like insights, like anytime someone posts something, how many comments and likes are you getting? So we have a lot of great data that shows engagement. And then really you got to work with the brand to see, did that push the needle? My understanding is the Old Spice ad, for example, that was a very, very successful program in the last 12 months with the Old Spice man. That it is as successful as that was. The results I've heard is, did it really push the needle? They're still trying to figure that out.
So are there brands, so you're bringing another insight here or a thought, are there brands that are actually not meant to be user-generated programs?
I actually can't. I thought about that. I don't think so. I think any consumer-facing brand is a great candidate to run user-generated content programs. But we also see enterprises that in the enterprise they're doing employee-generated content, where you might go out. It could be a contest or a program that runs on the corporate intranet, and they're asking the employees to share innovations and tips that they're doing across the organization on how to do certain things, or tips that they have shared. Or we're also seeing organizations using it so that the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer, can have a dashboard of all the creative assets that have been produced. So if someone sees an ad for their brand on a billboard, they'll take a picture and share that in the company intranet. And where a lot of this stuff we see it going is gamification, adding that layer of giving out points and badges for the more engaged, the more pictures you upload, and perhaps that HR will give out free trip to someone who does X, Y, and Z. So I actually cannot think of someone who could not benefit from user-generated content programs.
Well, it's interesting that you're highlighting that user-generated content can be an employee engagement strategy as much as a customer engagement strategy.
Yeah,
and that it works in both dimensions. So, Steve, we talked a lot about user-generated content, but there's another big tsunami that's hitting the beaches, which is this crowdsourcing, and we see it in the automotive industry. And I saw a TV commercial just a couple of days ago where they're promoting a crowdsourcing website. What's that all about?
Well, yeah, I think crowdsourcing and user-generated content really kind of go hand in hand. And there's all kinds of, really crowdsourcing is where you are leveraging a tribe or a community to get feedback from. It could be as simple as a poll could be a way of getting crowdsourcing, or it could be, we want to find the best nacho recipe. Everyone submit your nacho recipe, and the crowd votes on what the best one is. It could be you're crowdsourcing designs for an upcoming launch of a TV show. So someone might make an opening intro. That's crowdsourced. So it could simply be you're looking for a tagline for a company, and you went out to your community and said, tell us what's the best tagline for this organization. So I think user-generated content really is crowdsourcing. and getting a community to engage with you, to submit ideas, stories, photos, videos. That would, I think, all qualify.
I recently did a presentation on the West Coast on, we call it triangulation of truth, how social media is impacting research. And obviously this sounds like crowdsourcing, user-generated content is another form of research. Are there correlations, effective use of that information?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly it. Everything, especially in social media, just about all of it really is crowdsourced. Now that you have critical mass and 1 billion people on Facebook, if you're a researcher and you want to find what an audience thinks about a certain subject, you now have the ability to go and do that. And there's all kinds of free tools out there to do that type of thing. And it's much easier to get that sort of feedback.
Looking at crowdsourcing, looking at user-generated content, who's doing a great job that we could learn from?
Well, I think there's a lot of brands out there. In the consumer package industry, over the last 5 years, they've all tried it out. I think what Procter & Gamble and Old Spice did with the Old Spice man was very, very successful. Getting feed, they had him got to ask him questions, and he would respond back with a video. Very, very powerful, and went virally. Is a good example where the Australian Tourist Board created the greatest job in the world, where they were giving away a $150,000 salary to someone who could tell them why they should have the job of blogging from the Whitsunday Islands, and that actually went internationally virally. So you see some travel organizations like that doing that. Doritos, I think, in Canada and in the U.S. I think in Canada, it recently ran a contest where they were looking for someone to create a new flavor for their chips. In the U.S., this recent Super Bowl example, where they gave away $1 million to someone to produce the 30-second spot for the Super Bowl. Those are some good examples, and I think we're going to see an awful lot more of them. I think it's starting to hit a critical mass now. And really, I think when you see 3 out of 10 Super Bowl commercials using UGC, I think you're going to see a lot more. It's just the start.
So if I'm an advertising agency, should I be concerned about this growth of user-generated content?
No, I think there's a bit of a misconception that user-generated content, someone will send back a 30-second spot and you still need an agency to come up with the concept and come up with the great creative. And you still need someone to curate this whole thing and manage it and program it. I always say user-generated content still needs to be programmed and curated, just like anything else. I think it's actually a real benefit to agencies. I think they need to think of it in a positive light. Because at the end of the day, the best part about it is if you're a brand and you have someone, there's no better way, I think, to engage users than have them be part of your marketing program. And the nice part about it as well is if you want to associate yourself with a pop star or a rock and roll band or a sports team, that comes with enormous costs. And you're always going to play second fiddle to whoever that sports team or person is. Whereas with user-generated content, you can be right there with your audience and have them, your brand ambassadors, help you create a great program and campaign. But by no means is this easy to do. You need a great creative team to come up with really engaging programs that will really resonate with their audience and get them participating.
So Steve, you pioneered a lot of this. You tend to be ahead of the curve before it happens. This is all great, mobile marketing, user-generated content, crowdsourcing. But, where do you see the future? Where do you see the next big thing?
Well, I certainly don't have a crystal ball, that's for sure. But what you start, I think you're kind of seeing on the other side of what we see right now. I think the idea that you'll access anything on any device, the fact that you're always going to be connected and geo-connected and know where people are and be able to engage with brands in any way on any device. I think we're already starting to see the start of that. I think gaming is interestingly merging with and becoming more and more mainstream. And I think where gamification is going and the idea of rewards and incentives, I could see that very much being a part of the enterprise, where our kids, when they go to an employer, they ask them what their engagement score is on Facebook or something like that. And that is the indicator of, how digitally literate they are and, how well they would perform in a certain company. And I could see jobs being just a series of tasks or games where it's crowdsourced to a group of people that could be all over the world, these knowledge workers living anywhere, and be participating in their company and working on different tasks or jobs. And maybe everyone is essentially a free agent or consultant.
It was definitely a big theme. I think Free Agent Nation was about 10 years ago with the growth of freelancers in the industries. And so maybe that's the second coming of that concept.
I could see very well that like gaming is something, in our home, we're always thinking about, should we introduce gaming to our kids? How much time should they spend on it? And I think there's going to be an aspect of gaming in the future in the workforce that employers are going to have to put tasks together that are really, really engaging, that people want to produce, and they'll incent them and motivate them through gaming concepts.
Yeah.
And I can see the same thing with brands. And this idea of someone creating a 30-second spot for Doritos is, I can see that becoming almost mainstream.
So we're going to wrap it up. If you were to give 3 tips to our audience on user-generated content, what would be the 3 tips, advice that you would give them?
The first one would be really, really think about your concept and make sure that it works with your brand values. Make sure that, you think it's something that's going to really resonate. It's an activity that you're asking them to do that isn't too laborious, that is easy to do, that anybody could actually produce. And then make sure too that you're using all the different platforms. You're using Facebook's social graph to drive that referral traffic back to your site and get that valuable earned media. And I would also think about how you moderate and curate that. So making sure that you're filtering out objectionable content that doesn't fit your content requirements, offensive content, and then also thinking about promoting the best stuff, tweeting it, putting it out on Facebook, making sure the world knows about it, and that again will drive more people back to your sites. That kind of sums it up.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Steve, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us. You'll see on the screen a call-in number. By all means, please dial in. We're going to keep the lines open for the next 15 minutes for questions. I'm sure you have questions about user-generated content, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much for joining Design Lounge.